Alright guys, Fastclogga again today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. With the rostermania teams becoming increasingly clear day by day, many have tried to decipher which are the best teams in the game and what should the order be of the top 4 to 6 rosters. We saw Doug Sent to Martin say that OpTic is slightly overrated. He reckons they're a top 4 team. aBeZy last night agrees with that sentiment and also says they are on their last legs 100% and on the brink of collapse OpTic if the first event doesn't go their way. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thank you very much indeed for doing that one. Just wanted to say, Doug, he's at it again, man. This guy's absolutely out of control. 28 years old. He's still grinding Vanguard ranked and he's once again the #1 player in the world. Obviously, the SR here is a little bit different to what you might see in like the Valorant ranked system where like, there's maybe more skill involved in terms of how it's deciphered. Rather in this, you kind of just keep grinding until you get #1. But you got to respect him, Doug. #1 player in the game again. Credit where it is due. How does this affect Scump's legacy? Says Cheetah with the replies. Come back to me, says Doug. But yes, Scump does not want to download that game again, I imagine. Like a lot of the guys in the seed are like, yeah, you'd have to pay me a lot of money to download Vanguard again, which is arguably why a lot of the 1v1s we could have seen didn't end up going down when the whole Warzone versus CDL drum was going on. This I wanted to mention as well, you guys may well know, Fastballer, he's actually kind of still around here. And, well, I thought it was an interesting comment actually that was made here on Reddit. So there was a discussion thread on, like, is the CDL nowadays way more boring than it used to be, right? As this guy says right here, we went from killer Choo-Choo Trent, Eggs pushing nades, Scump shouting he's the best to, nowadays everyone's kind of faceless, no flavor, representing franchises that no one feels attached to. Like, maybe he's got a point to a certain degree, but I do think like COD still has its flavor to a certain element. Like last season we had some great drama, Crim versus Hydra, You're Dead to Me, Drazah versus FaZe and all this type of stuff. I don't think that it's, obviously like, hey, the scene is maybe marginally more mature than it was 10 years ago, but I don't think it's necessarily less entertaining. But also, well, people were commenting about Fastclogga, right? It's like, well, as Palace says here in the reply, it's crazy to think a pro player clogging his team's toilets because he got dropped was nearly 4 years ago. So if you guys aren't familiar with the story, Fastballer was known briefly as Fastclogga because I believe, was it Accelerate Gaming or whatever? I think it was during the Black Ops 4 season. Fastballer got dropped from his roster. He wasn't so happy. I think he went to aBeZy's house or something and just clogged up his toilets. Now, yeah, so this is why people still know Fastballer as Fastclogga. If you guys aren't familiar with this story, then I just thought I'd share it because it was pretty funny. And actually, Fastballer right here decides to reply. I guess like this is either his burner account or like, yeah, he actually upvotes this. So I'm guessing this is actually his account that he just posted this on. I thought maybe like he saw a comment that he was like, yeah, that's pretty funny, so I'll just claim it as mine. But apparently this is indeed his comment. And of course, Fastclogga also known for the 1v1 versus Karma incident at Anaheim. Was it Anaheim? Pretty sure it was Anaheim. 2017, when the OpTic dynasty almost broke apart. If he won that 1v1, they probably would have done. He lost the 1v1, the OpTic dynasty stayed alive, won the world championship, that is how it is. But yeah, as he says, I'm still going, never lost a fight in my life, almost ended the OpTic dynasty, just beat Rise to make it top 8 that event in the money, right after Rise won the first event at Vegas, and he goes on and on and on. So Fastballer and these personalities that have been around the scene for a time are still here, at least in some facet or another. Let's talk OpTic Texas then for next season. Obviously, we saw Zinni recently. He was on the kind of OpTic roundtable discussion thing that happens here, and Scott was like, yeah, I get to wreck you for at least one more season in the CDL. So, he's going to be on the Boston Breach. Scump's going to be on OpTic Texas. Of course, OpTic Texas could have been a rather different roster going into this season, but they decided to make no changes at the end of the day. The Flank episode went down last night discussing who's going to be the best team, what should the order be of the best teams in the CDL for next season, what is the ranking, how good will FaZe be, LA Thieves, Seattle Surge, OpTic, Minnesota Rokkr, Toronto, all these teams that have either reformed or kept their rosters together. What is effectively the power rankings of the new rosters? We'll see what aBeZy has to say on that in a second, and I'm sure there'll be more thoughts on this in the coming weeks. But the OpTic side of things I thought was rather interesting. We know that they were this close to breaking apart. Dashy and iLLeY were told they were getting dropped from the team. They were not happy about it at all. Dashy was kind of mind-blown, right? We don't know where he was going to go. We don't know where iLLeY was going to go. But they'd announced they were going to leave. The organization had announced they were going to leave. Scump then changed his mind. Was it Formal who phoned up Scump and said, look, you're faded for dropping Dashy? And then they spoke with Dashy and were like, look, do you want to keep iLLeY? And he was like, yeah, we want to keep iLLeY. So they ended up deciding to run it back. But there was obviously a rift within that team. There was a fracture within that team. I'm sure that despite they say everything is healed, like, whatever went wrong, whether there's resentment still against the coaching staff or, whatever was going on within that camp, to a certain degree, they may have plastered over the wounds, but it's still, far from guaranteed that everything is resolved for next season, right? So look, of course, aBeZy, as he is, he's going to say FaZe are #1. He's going to say OpTic are certainly not #1, but he reckons that OpTic are about #4 going into next season, which in fairness is exactly what, Doug, as we talked about, said just yesterday. And yeah, we saw this kind of comment from Doug when he says, yeah, OpTic are overrated. They're not a god squad. They're not as good as people think they are. They're a solid team. They like each other. They're good. And he wasn't even talking about the possible risk for this OpTic roster, right? Because at the end of the day, this season we believe is starting much earlier than it usually does. It's going to kick off in December. And like OpTic are usually good at the start of the season. If things go badly early on, then you know, I don't imagine this roster lasts the entire year. There was obviously a reason that Scump or whoever wanted to blow it up and go down a different route. Was it the iLLeY injury that was still a bit of a concern, and they thought, you know what, we've got to get rid of iLLeY because of his thumb injury. It's a bit of a risk, and therefore if we do get rid of iLLeY, we need some sort of leadership role, and therefore we can't have Dashy as our main because we need a main who can provide leadership, or whatever the case was, what they were thinking internally. But X describes OpTic as being on the brink of collapse, saying that if something goes wrong at the start of the season, it's all come tumbling down.
About OpTic? Yep, and everything that went down, and now they're keeping their team. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think they're on the verge of collapse, Tom.
No
I think they're on the verge of collapse.
On, you believe that, Pat? Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think so. Listen, the way they tried to play it off like it was some big community troll, like they had it all under control the whole time. No, listen, this team was on the verge of collapse. Did any of them try to play it off
like that? Because I don't think
they did. Not the players, not the players. The social media.
Yeah.
Listen. This team's on the brink of collapse. Yeah, I think if the first event goes wrong, I think we're gonna see some of those threads snap, and probably gonna see some early roster change coming from the OpTic camp, early 2023. It's my take.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know exactly the details of what the hell happened, but it wasn't a troll. They clearly wanted to make some sort of a change. I don't really know what that was, but once you start to doubt your teammates, it's all over. Like, I don't really know if they're gonna be able to suck it up and you know, work hard. And try to get back to the form that they want to be at. I think if anything starts to go wrong, you know, that doubt's going to come back. But who knows? They might just have a fire under their ass and come out and start performing really well. So, you know, it could go both ways. But like I said, as soon as something starts to go wrong, it's not going to look good.
Yeah, I definitely think the start of the year is going to be really important for them. Really, really important.
iLLeY never like tweets that crazy.
But he hasn't said a word, so I think he's still feeling some way about what happened. Brandon, obviously, you saw that clip on him on stream. He was playing Valorant. He was like, "Oh no, trust me, this wasn't a troll." Blah blah blah. Like, I think it's going to be in the back of their minds for a little while, and I think, you know, as soon as those, you know, poor performances happen, I think it's going to start pushing some buttons, and we'll see it all unfold. But yeah, I'm not too high on the OpTic camp. I think they're a talented squad, but I think internal issues are going to arise pretty quickly. FaZe number 1, LAT number 2.
That's all he got.
No, hold on. I can go through all 12.
All right, go ahead.
LAT number 2.
Yeah.
Toronto number 3. OpTic number 4, Seattle number 5, we'll go Rokkr 6, LAG 7, New York 8, Boston 9, London 10, Florida 12 or 11, Paris 12.
So I think he probably has a point to a certain degree that this OpTic team definitely, I don't think it has quite as long of a tenure as they had previously if things don't go so well. Now, of course, OpTic traditionally are very good at the start of the season. If they do turn out to be rather good at the start of the season, then of course, I think things probably stay the same and they stick it out. The issue really is for OpTic, I think their substitute decision, who they pick up as their sub, is quite important going into the new year, just because how many options really are there on the table right now? If OpTic decide to need to make a change at some point, and if, like, let's say the rift occurs once again, and even if the rift doesn't necessarily occur as whatever was happening in the last couple of weeks, but it's more like the team doesn't get the results, then like it obviously has a bit of a shorter lifespan, I think, this roster than it had before. I think, you know, frustrations will arise, and of course they're obviously hoping that iLLeY's thumb injury kind of resolves itself as well and isn't a problem either. So I think they've got to really make a decision, because at the end of the day, let's say they go into Major 1, the Prime, in December, it doesn't go so well, and then they probably stick it out one more event, go to Major 2, that doesn't go so well either in February time, then it might be time to pull the trigger, right? And would a one-person change be enough in that situation? Like, who knows even what they would do? Like, it's a really difficult situation, right? But Aches believes there's at least a good chance this team is not surviving the season and they're going to make a change after Major 2 or something. Now, at the end of the day, there probably will be many other teams also making changes around that time, but I do think the question is interesting as to exactly what the plan would be for OpTic if they did decide to make a move, because they had their option here, right? This was their time if they wanted to make a move. Some would say they've made a good decision sticking. I honestly think looking at the roster they could have had with Cammy and Hydra, like I'm not necessarily so convinced that that team would have been a massive upgrade on this team. At least this squad is proven. This team of 4, they know that they can win events as they did at Major 1 last season. So I don't really doubt the idea of sticking being a good idea compared to what they could have done, and also allowing Dashy and iLLeY to be free agents, go to maybe another team together, probably wouldn't have been ideal for OpTic either, letting those guys, go onto the market. But if they do decide to make a change and it is a 1 or 2 man change, like what change do they actually make? Because this was their time period in this crazy offseason to make a big move if they wanted to, right? They probably could have got Arcitys back as it turned out, right? If they were going to get rid of Dashy and iLLeY or whatever, like they could have probably got Arcitys as the main ER, they could have probably got a Cammy as their flex player, maybe put Scump to that role, get Hydra, whatever you want to do. There were some options. There were many big name free agents on the market. Now, those names I mentioned are locked down. Cammy's going to be in a big deal with Minnesota Rokkr. Arcitys is in a big deal with Los Angeles Guerrillas. Like, you can't just get these players. The only world in which they can really pick up a big name player is if other teams decide to make big changes, where, look, OpTic will be the number one priority for a lot of players that are getting dropped, but if they're getting dropped from other teams, will they be a key target for OpTic? It's a big question, right? It's kind of rare that OpTic make mid-season changes, and even when they have done in the past, let's say World War II OpTic, it's not always like they've got the players they wanted. Like, you'd have thought World War II OpTic after the Dynasty period, like, they'd have had pretty much everyone begging them to get on their team, but as it turned out, they wanted John, they wanted Zuma, they wanted even Huke or whatever, and none of those players they could get to that to get methods as another AR, which obviously was never ideal for them. So I think some will say that OpTic kind of missed the boat to make a change, but I think that probably their decision is wise, but like they just have to actually deliver the goods at the start of the season, right? Because if they're not good at the start of the year, they're probably not going to be good as the year progresses either. I definitely think they can be good. Will they be, top 2? I think that's a question. We saw what Doug had to say on it yesterday, and of course, Aches gives his opinion on the rankings of teams. I thought him having Toronto 3rd was interesting to me just because I'm not really super confident on that Toronto team, to be perfectly honest. I think it has a high ceiling, a top 3 ceiling, but I wouldn't expect it to be a top 3 team, especially above, OpTic, Seattle. I'd certainly put them above. I might put OpTic in the top 3 range, to be honest. I think that FaZe and Thieves, you've probably got to give them their credit over OpTic, so I'd probably have OpTic 3rd in my list, I would think, and then Seattle maybe slightly behind, and then Minnesota Rokkr, Toronto, these teams are there or thereabouts. So I don't think I'd have OpTic 4th, but I don't think my list would be all that much different to Aches. But definitely tweet your thoughts in the comment section below, right? And what does this also mean just going into the events? Like, this is the schedule we believe is going to be happening. Like, the Major 1 is going to happen on about the 16th of December, right? That's very early for a first event. And obviously, if the season ends in June, then after 2 events in pretty much early February, then teams are already going to be considering changes, right? But in fairness, there's only, 1 week off between, at least according to this provisional schedule, between Major 2 and the start of the Major 3 qualifiers. So, I don't know, like, teams are going to have to consider making changes if they will be making changes. I'm sure around this time, teams will be, as it tends to be the time of the season where teams do. They could, of course, also, if things go terribly at Major 1, make a change here, but I don't think teams are really going to be pulling the trigger that early unless things go horribly wrong. But if OpTic were to make a change, it's really difficult to say what they would even do, as I say, given the fact that a lot of their targets this past off-season are now going to be locked up unless they happen to be free agents again. So that's why I think the decision in terms of what they do from their kind of substitute perspective is pretty important. Like, can they get a good sub that can fit many particular roles? Like, for example, gunless, right? Like, surely maybe an OpTic gunless could be an option. Yes, chemistry, whatever, could be an issue, but, look, if iLLeY has a recurring injury or whatever the case is, bringing gunless in is at least a player of the caliber that can play at that type of level, right? There's not many players that are as talented as gunless is that could potentially sit in that role. So I'd consider an option like that. Of course, gunners can kind of be a flex as well. He could maybe run an SMG if absolutely necessary, but he's better in the role that iLLeY currently runs. He can do some leadership stuff. So there's some questions there what they decide to do, but I think they've got to take it pretty serious who they bring in as their sub, just in case issues arrive, because we've seen a lot of people saying it's not out of the realms of possibility, especially because they're either kicking Sender or Sender is deciding to leave. Our best guess probably is that Sender goes to Los Angeles Guerrillas to join Arcitys over there from the Huntsman days, kind of being that kind of coach AR relationship. So we'll see on that one, but if they're getting rid of Sender, that might mean one less voice to mediate issues. So, look, definitely intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Of course, to some degree, it's Aches being Aches, right? And he's just saying this to say this. That's how Aches rolls. But yeah, I think he believes this to a certain extent as well. There was also some talk on the episode about Parasite where he could potentially go. Could he be an assistant coach somewhere, like a strategic coach? I think he can be very viable. And he seems somewhat confident that still teams will make their mind up over the coming days and weeks to potentially bring Parasite into a team. So I would personally like to see it. OpTic Parasite back in business again, if you guys remember the good old OpTic Parasite days from back in Ghost to about a couple of weeks. But very much enjoyed your thoughts and all this stuff in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, hit the like button. Tell us on YouTube gods, this is a good video, and I was like you should see it as well, and help grow the competitive Call of Duty community. Thank you for watching as always. Take care, and I'll see you next time.